Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it is time for the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. First question. Jason, let's say you have overreached on one of your main compound lifts, such as the squat, and decide to take a deload. Can you still push yourself with intensity and weight on other lifts like the bench or overhead press and still properly deload the squat? Thanks. Kind of a tricky question. I guess it depends upon whether you actually had overreached systematically and you needed to deload, or if you felt like just your squat was stalling a little bit and you chose to deload to let that one lift and peripheral nervous system around your legs recover a little bit and recover and adapt. If you just kind of felt you were stalling slightly on the squat and decided to deload that exercise, or you were maybe feeling some discomfort in the connective tissue of your lower body, it would be perfectly fine to continue to push with upper body stuff. However, if you were doing a full overreaching and you know that you've chronically overreached and you wanted to get maximum adaptation and recovery from your deload, then the answer is absolutely not. You should deload everything, particularly if you're seeing signs that you are definitely overreaching and at risk of basically overtraining, then yeah, you need to deload everything at that point. So it really kind of depends upon the purpose of your deload and why you decided to deload. Really kind of answers the question for you. It's not a simple yes or no answer. So hopefully that helps. All right, next question. Hey Jason, you've previously mentioned that developing big shoulders as a drug-free person requires a bit of research. However, I'm curious how you would personally go about it if you were to train an individual for maximum hypertrophy in that area, assuming the person is on a full body program with decent shoulder flexibility with no limitations. All right, great question. The fact that you said that they have no limitations and great shoulder flexibility actually gives me a bit of a different answer. If they have any mobility issues or flexibility issues with their shoulder girdle, I'm going to recommend that they do a strict press for a bit until they get strong on it and then switch over to a push press as their primary shoulder exercise. Now, for those whose goal is, again, maximum hypertrophy of the entire shoulder girdle and the deltoids, who is drug-free, if they have no flexibility or mobility limitations, I would recommend that they do behind the neck presses with a pause on their traps on every single rep. None of this touch and go stuff, an actual half-second pause on every rep, pausing on there, and then I would basically have them get as strong as possible on that in, say, the 5 to 8 rep range, and then I would have them do pretty hefty amounts of face pulls with bands, if bands are available, and if not, then with cables. But the combination of moderately heavy progressive overload on the pause behind the neck press combined with a lot of higher rep work for band face pulls will actually give them a well-developed shoulder structure and maintain fantastic shoulder health and overall mobility. If, of course, they can't do the behind the neck press safely and without pain, or without using the correct bar path to do it safely, which again, not everyone can do, the other option would be the push press, and again, the same thing with the face pulls thrown in, but I might consider as well for those individuals some sort of side lateral movement with cables or dumbbells done in a way that I've kind of explained before in the past. I've done videos on that to where you have the thumb up, not the pinky up, again, in order to maintain shoulder health and not damage the glenoids in the shoulder joint. So that's basically what I would have them do. The heavy focus, though, with no limitations on them, pause behind the neck presses in the moderate rep range, combined with lots of band face pulls for higher reps, and that should sort everything out with minimal exercise selection, but give them maximum development and maintain good shoulder structural integrity and movement patterns. All right, next question. Thoughts on rotating accessory movements every 3 weeks while you keep doing the same main movement so you don't lose any neural efficiency on main movements. For example, closed grip bench press for 3 weeks, floor plus for 3 weeks, weighted dips for 3 weeks, then repeat. Or bicep curls and hammer curls and reverse curls and repeat. There are so many movements I want to do, and I may not even need them. I just enjoy having more variety. What do you think? I think as long as you're focusing on progression on your primary movements, and then you have one basic secondary exercise that you do for a lot of these muscle groups or movement patterns, again, such as dips, closed grip bench press, floor press for triceps, chest, And again, those 3 different types of curls for your biceps, brachialis, radial brachialis, all of that. Yeah, I think that's perfectly acceptable because you're still focusing on the movement patterns and developing those for months on end on your main movements. And what you can basically do by doing it this way, you can focus on progression on each accessory movement and then kind of get around the law of accommodation by changing them every 3 weeks. What I don't like to see is guys trying to do 6 different isolation movements for a body part or rotating through them multiple times through the week, because again, you're not learning the movement patterns effectively and progressing as easily on each of those. Whereas if you rotate through them separately, you can absolutely make progress for the 3 weeks, see some muscle growth, and then switch to a different one once you start to stall out a little bit. And that's perfectly acceptable because again, you're doing them for 3 weeks straight. Now, that being said, that is actually a pretty popular method by certain gyms and coaches out there. Some of the top powerlifting coaches in the world actually incorporate this method. So it works for powerlifters, and of course it works for bodybuilders because they're doing these accessory movements to build maximal muscle mass in those areas. And this seems to work really well. But the thing that you need to do if you do this is that you do need to track your progress on these secondary exercises. So you'll need to keep notes of them and note how strong you were when you did them during the last block, because you're going to have a 6-week gap before you do that exercise again. You need to be able to progress on it a little bit, even if it's just a tiny amount. Once you get to that new 3-week block again, 6 weeks later of it, you do need to kind of try to see where you were and see if you can progress and surpass where you had previously been at the end of your 3-week block, if you really want to make the most out of this and actually get some muscle growth out of those accessory movements. Because remember, progressive overload is king. All right, next question. All right, and I'm going to slaughter some of these names here, but here's the question. If elite level powerlifters such as Malanichev.Zahir Lillebridge, etc., were drug-free, how much do you think they would lift approximately? They are obviously genetic freaks, and I assume they would have very impressive numbers even if they were drug-free. I'm going to disagree with you here, and I don't want to try to give specific numbers, but the truth is all of your champions are there due to combinations of genetics and drugs. You take the drugs out of the equation, and a lot of them are not going to be as strong as you think they are, meaning an 800-pound squatter who's been using drugs for 7 years, 8 years, 10 years straight to get there at heavy doses, you might be thinking, oh, well, he's just going to squat 500 or 600 if we had taken the drugs away and he never did them. But you don't know that for a fact. They might have squatted 500 and they probably would drug-free if they can get to 800 on drugs, but that's not an actual guarantee. And maybe they would have got 600. It's too hard to tell. And the thing is, you can't even compare them to the drug-free guys and go, well, the drug-free guys hit numbers that are almost as good, and in some cases pass them. Yeah, because they're not drug-free either. The problem is that we don't really have legitimately drug-free elite level powerlifters in the world for you to compare them to, because without the drugs they don't become the elite level even in the tested federations. So, and I know that's going to burst a lot of people's bubble and they don't want to hear that, but you take drugs out of the mix and you can't really come up with realistic comparisons because the drugs were required to get there. And that's not to say that it's only the drugs doing it. I don't want to give that impression, because it does require genetics and hard work to be a world-class level power lifter anyways, irrespective of how many drugs you use. But again, you'd be surprised that a lot of people's genetics are oftentimes how well they respond to drugs, how low a side effects they get, and how well they respond to the drugs themselves. Some people have a fourth or a fifth of the side effects that other people do at the same dose, and they get 50% or double the gains from it. So you can see how the drugs could actually be a factor in genetics as well. So you can't just pull that out and say, oh, I bet they would be great, amazing powerlifters. No, they might not be without the drugs. Again, you'd be really surprised. And it's not something that you can quantify or say exactly where they would or wouldn't be without the drugs. Maybe they would be great, maybe they would be good, but maybe they wouldn't. And we will never know. All right, next question. You always talk about gains in maximum protein synthesis uptime. What about maintenance for naturals once they've stopped making progression? Is 3 full body workouts per week still advisable? Honestly, once you kind of stalled out and you're a natural lifter and you know that you're seeing tremendously diminished returns, that you're gaining, no more than a few ounces of muscle every year, no matter how efficiently or effectively you train, and you just say, you know what, I'm okay with not pushing hard and I just want to stay where I'm at. Honestly, you can train however you want at that point. It won't matter as long as you keep the tension there. And what I mean by however you matter, you could go over to a 5-day-a-week body part bro split and probably maintain your size, or you could cut back to 1 or 2 full body workouts every week with only 1 work set and still maintain your size. You're not going to really see much difference between the two. Just train how you enjoy. And if you're worried about, well, I'm burning less calories because I'm training less or whatever you're doing, then you could always incorporate more cardio to make up for that, if that's a concern for you. But as far as how you should actually train, it's not going to matter much. You could train as much or as little as you enjoy personally and have time for in your life, and you get fulfillment out of without injury at that point. Because honestly, maintaining muscle mass once you get there is easier than people make it out to be. The people who say, no, it's hard to maintain, are guys on hefty amounts of drugs, and it's because they come off the drugs periodically, and then it is hard for them to maintain. But drug-free guys, not really. You could, if you really, really wanted to, you could come in and lift 1 day a week and do just a full body once a week or twice a week and maintain all your gains just fine, if that's what you choose. But not everyone enjoys training that little. So basically, just do whatever you want. All right, next question. Hey Jason, what's your opinion on programming for powerlifting DUP style, where one would have strength, hypertrophy, and power sessions through the course of 1 week versus a program that has one do distinct blocks for hypertrophy, strength, and ultimately peaking that build on each other? Heard different theories on this subject. Some claim that the different stimuli that one would encounter during a week during DUP style would be suboptimal. Is this correct? Thanks, mate. Honestly, this really depends on who you ask. And yes, I know a lot of guys are going to say, but the West Side guys do concurrent style training, which is basically DUP year round, and they stay peaked, whatever, for their meets year round. But yeah, but guys are also doing multiply. Doing multiply with large amounts of drugs is probably a different animal than just about any other style of powerlifting you're going to do. And it kind of has its own unique needs. Me personally, I tend to follow the opinion that the DUP style training is going to give inferior stimulus towards your specific goal for whatever that week happens to be. So I think people who want to do particularly raw powerlifting need to do block style periodization, like you were saying. As they peak for a meet, I would say block style periodization is going to be superior to DUP. Now, we could also argue that Bulgarian light style training might be even better, but that's a completely separate argument. But yeah, I hold the opinion that for just about any sort of lifter who's going to compete in a specific strength sport like that, running DUP style training should be left to kind of the off season for them, and then they should do linear periodization and block periodization to peak for a meet. Whereas then I usually reverse that for field athletes, because field athletes need to be basically building these different elements in the off season, and then they need to maintain all of their performance elements during the in season. So I reverse it for field athletes with an actual distinctive on-season and off-season. But again, power lifters and lifters of that nature who are going to peak for events, no, I would limit DUP to the off-season, and then maybe 12 weeks out from an actual meet, switch over to linear block periodization like you described, with distinctive phases in different blocks and weeks. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.